Okay, so we've complicated this question a little bit because you came in and you thought that we were going to be talking solely about the practicalities of interfacing between those working on the technology side and those working on the creative side, and those are also like it's an artificial divide in and of itself as well. Actually, Kendra, I want to start with one other question, just to sort of contextualize my next one. Is that the thinking of it, because I think that the climate conversation, as the great existential crisis of our time, is key. And to make good on what you've promised, that I will say that in working with other projects, not necessarily Toasterlab projects, but where that does play a part into the reason that we make what we make and the way that we make it. But working with right now a project with the NAC on their cycle on theory climate change, that bringing into the conversation that even when we try and do things like live streaming, that or send an email or do all that coordination, that it also has an impact. And so like releasing yourself from the ability to like completely to correct for that and look at what you can contribute versus what you need to stop doing as a priority. I would like to ask
you should talk about that.
It's not about me. I'm going to make it about you for a second. Could you take 1 minute and just give us a little bit of information about what the type of work that The Only Animal makes?
Yeah, we make immersive work with a deep connection with place. Often that means site-specific work, often elemental work, often in wilderness locations. I live on the Sunshine Coast, and so I'm more wild. Feels like suburban now to me, but in a more wild context. We also have created work with AR, actually, in the past. There was a whole stream of work that went down that way. More recently, in a more climate-conscious form, we've decided to be a no-fly company. After my last trip to the UK and grappling with those numbers, we felt like that was the ethical choice. And the other kind of production-based approach that we have right now is that we're a buy-nothing-new company. So, and that felt like the right choice for us, given our context. We've always been a company that made impossibly large work. So we have never relied on our touring, again, so like no carbon guilt, because we could do this. We were placed in a way where we want to be hyper-local and really rooted to the places that we live.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. And that helps me bridge to the next question, because we're talking about a couple of different barriers to collaboration here, which I'd like to open up to everybody, and then hopefully to a couple of questions. Is this question of these interfaces that we find ourselves of, that in some ways, like, we're all people, but some of us find ourselves more in pushing forward the creative, maybe artistic side of it. If we take on that label, maybe the non-technologist side of it, we're intersecting with technologists, we're intersecting with climate scientists. How do you find yourself in each of your practices sort of like starting to bridge this divide? You got to this a little bit, Kendra, so I might turn it to Hector and Julianne first.
I actually think this is an access issue, and I look at it in terms of access. And I was really curious about the questions you were asking earlier, Kendra, in terms of like access to, and I think I interpret it as like access to the arts. So if we're going to have conversations about climate and really bridge those gaps between technologist and artist, and in fact artist and general public actually is, and speaks to, we need more artists in different collaborative processes in different sectors, but that my interpretation and my sort of spin on it is access, like breaking down those theater walls, like not making work exclusive for people who have to go into a theater, for like the message of, like, I do work in site-specific ways as well, and on the street, like, anybody can come and see that. The messages that people take home with them are key to perpetuating our work as artists, as messaging it in a particular way, entry points into that before we, bash anybody on the head. They have to, like, see what we're doing first, and then you know, go along on the journey with us. And so how we tell stories, how we create experiences is about that too, I think.
Particularly for me, I find that siloing people, or like that's actually part of the problem with the educational system, that we're like, okay, you're an engineer, you're an artist, you are this, you are that, kind of put you in these blindfolds about the things that you should or should not care about, and then kind of like diminish the impact that other areas can actually have in society as a whole. So for me, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle, like I'm in a bit of a big transition. And then like not only being able to collaborate with other people and other causes that are relevant to you and to the people around you, but also being able to take the leap and be, you know what, maybe I'm interested in this specific aspect of technology. And nowadays we have such a vast resource network in terms of what you can learn and what you can do online, or the type of people you can get connected with in order to collaborate. You just take a leap of faith and start using different and new emerging media in order to communicate these type of messages, because in our society we are used to a very high amount of information, or like stuff that gets thrown at you. And then coming from the gaming industry, I know the tricks that we use to get you to keep engaged and like hooked into your phone, just like come back into this, and this is based on cognitive psychology and like behaviorism from the 80s with like Skinner boxes and different techniques that now are commonplace in the gaming industry. So there's like a whole ethical debate in that part, but the thing is that if we grab all of those things that we know about interaction and experience design and human psychology, and we put that to the service of science divulgation, or like awareness for different social issues, particularly in the streets where it touches people, not where like people have to like take that leap and just like, okay, I'm gonna go to this specific place to get educated, because that's after they already know that they want to learn about that, right? It's just like literally putting it out there and getting people enticed, right? Just like trying to like hook them in. And to get that, we really, really need to tear down all of those barriers and collaborate with people from different mindsets and be willing to grab different pieces or like different techniques ourselves.
Thank you. Kendra, do you want to add anything before? I'd like to open that up. Are there questions? Okay.
Well, I feel like we're past the stage where access to information is the limit. It's really how can we make people care about it and act on it. And so in a way, I mean, that's how I use virtual reality in my classroom. So right now in the class I teach, basically all the students have to do VR virtual reality projects designed to create experiences that really address climate change, and not in terms of, okay, yes, information about it, you can find that online. The question is, what would be an experience that actually gets you to not fly, or fly less, or whatever, switch to SkyTrain instead of driving your SUV kind of thing. So I think, and this is really where we need to bring all the different disciplines together. So I totally agree with the point, like we need the arts, we need the scientists, we need the experience designers. There's hardly any field that we don't need to achieve this.
It's Kendra, you and I were talking about this during the lunch break too. Is that sort of, and we've talked about it a bit before, but some of the origins for the way that we work at Toasterlab and our entrance into mixed reality came actually out of doing work that was interested in remote environments that were threatened by climate change, and looking at how performance interacted with places that would be disappearing, and then what are the tools that would allow someone to either experience them at a different time or place, so that you could increase impact there. And that's what drove us to the tools of it. So it's something that I think is an intrinsic conversation about how do we sort of open up those spaces. I want to add a question onto that, because you mentioned, Kendra, you mentioned how hard it was to tour the Only Animals work. And I know that we've experienced that in our projects, that like touring them means recreating them, and there's no such thing as a tour. You do it again someplace else from scratch. And Hector, you're launching something that's going to be in multiple sites. Julian, you'd have the project that is tied to a specific place, and I'm wondering about what sort of the potentials and also limitations that you see with that sort of like interaction of a technology that allows people to experience something asynchronously, like you can come to it at a different time, or perhaps experience some of it from a different place, and your attachment to place, and sort of how those drive that sort of duality drives the decisions around the work. And Kendra too. Oh, no, go for it.
I just wanted to sort of say that I toured with Crystal Pite, with her dance company for more than 12 years internationally and nationally, and these issues of carbon footprint weren't being talked about during those days, and it's very challenging to think about that time. and then in context to your question about how do we recreate and site-specific work and all this, and I think that we're still struggling with that. Like, how do you create a live, like my form is really a live experience. So what does that mean to technology? How does that transfer into, like, where are our markets is a big question we have to answer as well. Opening up different markets for our work. Maybe it isn't touring anymore. Maybe it's experiencing a show in a VR space that could actually tour and replace the live experience or replace something else that we pass along. But I'm still struggling with that point, like how to create in the space that you're talking about, and how to cross-pollinate with other communities, other artists in those communities, and share ideas is really like a fundamental thing that we would do back in the day with touring. That is really important to think about as we move forward in this technology world as well. So I don't know if I answered, but I'm certainly thinking about these things in a different context.
Right.
For me, it's like you have to keep looking at what's gonna come, right? And if you look around at everything that's happening in the development of technologies like the HoloLens, the Magic Leap, and then like now we have 1 billion phones that are capable of doing augmented reality, like, and everyone has it in their pockets. We are at a point where we can easily communicate experiences, not only content. Right? It's like you can communicate stuff that people can interact with and experience in totally new, novel ways, and that comes at a risk. There's a few very interesting examples of what a dystopic future like that would happen, like with augmented reality glasses, and then you just like see a bunch of ads, and like everyone is trying to sell you something. But I feel like part of that conversation, and to answer that specific question, it's our decision, because we as creators and as designers, we choose intentionally how we use the media, right? And for example, in my work, the social interaction and being with other people in the space is very important. So whether that is site-specific interactive installations or augmented reality exhibits that have social features or something that you experience in public, it becomes a matter of choice. So you would use blue where you want blue in a painting, or you would use red when you want red in a painting, right? So it's kind of using that as a design language, or being intentional with the choices that you do in terms of developing these experiences for the future, being aware of what's going to happen and how that's going to shape like future experiences that other people are going to perceive.
When we decided to become a no-fly company, it was a decision that was it was an intense amount of grief to let go of that. But what I had to reckon with is the belief that it's here already, that the community is here with which to create our work, that the people are here to experience our work, and that we don't need other people in other places. And that hyperlocality has for us made us dig much more deeply into our community to look for the lighting designer that we always brought from Regina, the director we wanted to hire from Toronto, and just go, okay, those options are off the table, what is here? And it has led to an intense and dedicated commitment to discovering more in our community. It's just like in my personal life, I'm not gonna take my kids to Mexico. So, well, where haven't we gone that's within the range of my electric car? Like, do I really know what's on Vancouver Island? Have I explored this and that and the other? And it's given me a new relationship place to go, it's all here. Let's discover what's here. And so there's been a profound gift in those things. And I still rely on the digital world for a lot of inspiration. I feel like that is like inspiration, connectivity, ideas. And then that I can disseminate the idea of hyperlocality when people call me and say, can you come to Ottawa and talk blah, blah, blah. I can say, no, but I know someone in Ottawa who's doing that work. And you're much more likely to continue that work if you talk to that person in Ottawa who you can build a real-time relationship with. And I feel like even as the digital technologies get better, and we want to use the heck out of all of the abilities of like, all of our board meetings happen on Zoom because we just have decided that our board is a national board because we need some of that intelligence. So we want to use those kind of tools to the best of our ability, but not, we want to use them in a carbon conscious way.
Thank you. Knowing that we're at time, I'm going to thank our panelists for sharing your work and your comments. And we'll take one moment right now to switch over to our third and final panel for the day.
Ha 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 ha!